We're live. I'm just going to give it a minute to let people tune in. Give it like 30 seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We're so glad that you're tuning in to yet another First Tuesday Conservatives, this time on a Wednesday. We apologize for the technical issues. Yesterday, Facebook was down, not streaming any content from Zoom, so we were not able to go live to you yesterday, but we're here at the usual time, but one day late on Wednesday. Thank you for your patience and thank you for tuning in. Before we get into a conversation with our guest this week, Jonathan Anstead, talking about the structure and operations of Antifa here in Minnesota, I want to give you a quick preview of some of our upcoming guests. On September 8th next week, we're going to start our Countdown to November 3rd series. You might remember me talking about this previously. It's a new series that will have us live streaming shows not only on Tuesday, but on other days as well. As we draw closer to the election, we think it is very important to educate, inform, and empower conservatives as much as possible. So we're going to be having guests on days other than the usual broadcast day. On September 8th, we're going to have let me see here. We're going to have, my apologies, folks. My tabs got messed up. On September the 8th, we're going to have Jeffrey Lord, an author, political strategist, associate political director for Ronald Reagan, Fox News contributor, and former CNN token conservative. He's going to discuss the swamp from his perch in Washington, D.C. That's going to be something very interesting. Most of the time we stick to Minnesota politics, but we're going to branch out a little bit and talk about what's happening in the swamp that is our nation's capital. We're also going to have Richie McGinnis on the show. You might remember that Richie was actually there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Richie's a coworker of mine over at the Daily Caller, and he was there when Kyle Rittenhouse did what Kyle Rittenhouse did, and we're going to speak with him a little bit about what he saw and why the mainstream media might be getting it wrong. On Wednesday, September the 9th, we're going to have Horace Cooper, a writer and legal commentator. He's also a research fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research. His new book is titled How Trump is Making Black America Great Again, The Untold Story of Black Advancement in the Era of Trump. That's going to be a very important conversation. We're going to try to counter some of the left's narrative that Trump has been bad for minority folks. And then on Thursday, September the 10th, we're going to have Elaine Parker, president of the Job Creators Network Foundation and the chief communications officer for the Job Creators Network. All right, now that we've got some of those announcements out of the way, I'm going to introduce to you Jonathan Anstead. He's been involved in politics for the last 15 years as an activist, consultant, and elected official in the Republican Party of Minnesota. He has chaired or implemented many campaigns and statewide operations of conservatives here. He's also one of the people fighting against the Antifa thugs, trying to hold them accountable for their felonious actions amidst the recent riots. Jonathan Anstead, so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. And I want to say thanks also to Scott and Joe and those guys over at First Tuesday. I've been going to First Tuesday meetings since I think their very first one, and they're a great group. And I'm glad that you guys migrated over here to do these things virtually, so at least we could keep it going.
You know, it's kind of weird. In the era of COVID, a lot of things have been forced online. And fortunately, this actually allows us to have more viewers than we might otherwise. So we've been grateful for the change. Tell us, you've been sort of studying and working with and thinking about Antifa here in Minnesota for a long time. What's your history with the group, and how long have you seen them have a presence in Minnesota?
A long time. I guess I want to start by saying, I really believe this is a fight for our rights. It may be a little uncomfortable, but we have to show up because there's strength in numbers. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the events I've been to, and some we've shown up and some we haven't. But this goes back to 2015. I don't know if many of you remember, but Donald Trump came in the summer of 2015 and initially did a fundraiser downtown Minneapolis at the convention center. And this was before I even had heard the term Antifa, had no idea who it was. We're standing in line to get into the convention center, and people ran up to us that I thought they looked like they were homeless people. And one woman threw paint on my buddy's girlfriend's dress, white paint. And the guy she was with hit my buddy like right in front of us for the head and stole his cell phone. And I got to tell you, I'm downtown Minneapolis in 2015. We didn't think about things like that happening to us. We were like shocked. So we went through the process of those two people plus three other ones filed criminal complaints. By the way, there were police on bikes right across the street from the convention center. They stood there and didn't do anything.
That's a
That's
trend.
when we found out that at that time, her name was Mayor Betsy Hodges. Many of you will know her. She was a real winner, as Trump would say. And she told the police to stand down. That's the first we'd ever even heard of that. Of course, those particular, criminal complaints got buried, never followed up. I was a witness. I did a witness statement, went through the whole process, and it just fell apart and never went to anything. So at that time, we were kind of, well, maybe this is a one-off. Maybe these are just crazy people. Again, never heard the term ANTIFA, didn't know anything about the organization, and we just got let go. Then after Trump won in 2016, and he took over. He was inaugurated, obviously, in January 2017. There were a couple of events. I'll go through three of them here that were organized by a couple of my good friends, Elliot Waterbury and Carol Schultzstead, organized an event called March for Trump. It was down at the Capitol. It was a very well-attended event. A lot of people remember it. I would say there were probably 500 people there. And now that's the first time that we really saw like a organized group with people dressed in black with weapons come into our group. I mean, they literally came in and they attacked us. One of them is the famous Woody Kane, Tim Kaine's son. He was at that time, had been vice presidential candidate with Hillary Clinton. And long story short, they attacked us. I got maced in the face. I couldn't see for 2 hours. I didn't know that they would carry weapons like mace. They had bats. They had a taser. They actually tasered one of my best buddies right next to me, and he went to the ground on his knees, and we thought, oh my God, what happened to him? I mean, this was all out attack and mayhem. Now, this is back in March of 2017. This is how long these people have been organized and attacking us. But again, didn't get any mainstream coverage, filed police reports. In fact, the next event we did too was called 100 Days. There was a rally that people planned that were basically Trump had promised a bunch of things he was going to do in his 100 days. So we had a rally, exact same situation down at the Capitol, organized. Once again, they showed up in even larger numbers this time. They attacked people going up the steps of the Capitol to come into our event. We had a guy was thrown down the stairs, broke his ribs. Another guy got hit over the head had a concussion. We had people stealing signs, stealing phones. So between those two events, we put together a group of plaintiffs, and there were 11 at that time from the March for Trump event to 100 Days event. And we literally kind of, I guess you'd say, camped out on John Choi's in his office, who's the county prosecutor over in St. Paul, and Bobby Clark's office, who was a city prosecutor, because city prosecutors all do basically misdemeanor on up, and then county prosecutor gets felonies. Of course, they were trying to figure out what to even charge these people, because it took us a year and a half of camping out on their doorstep to get these people charged. We went to every court appearance. These 11 of us showed up. Every court appearance, went to every, and this is how those DFL appointed types will respond to anyone that's a Trump supporter. It was absolutely mind-boggling. So then we did another event that was to complain about this. We invited the media. I was one of the speakers, and we talked about the fact that it's taking us forever. And this was in the summer then of 2017. After a few months, this time the Highway Patrol was there. They separated. The group showed up again, but they were separated outside. We stayed inside, and not much happened at that event. So finally, after these other two events, they basically, kind of stepped up and said, I guess we better keep some law and order. And this is after we complained, several times to the Capitol. Their security police force is the State Patrol. That's who is the security police force. They're the ones that, provide security for the governor, for all the legislators down there. When I'm down there, when everyone's down there, they're our security. So after we complained enough, they finally acquiesced a bit. The most recent, there were some other events after that, but in the consideration of time, the most recent one is the most egregious, I think, is we a bunch of friends of mine we started going to some of the Back to Blue events. You've heard of some of those popping up all around. Well, we went to this one back a few months ago, and it was in front of Governor Walz's mansion. And there were probably 50, maybe 60 of us. Well, they showed up with 250. And that's another thing about Antifa. They show up in large numbers. That's one of the things that they do. And they literally, it took a while. There were St. Paul police there in riot gear this time. They had the group separated. Well, because there were so many of them, they spilled out and they came back around and they surrounded us. And again, they attacked us. And I got a broken wrist out of the deal, which I'm still dealing with.
Wow.
These people are absolutely insane and they're violent. And a good friend of mine, Sherry O'Clair, who went to the last Back to Blue event we went to, was in Bloomington. And her comment was she couldn't believe how angry these people are. I mean, they literally scream at you in your face, spit coming out of their mouth. I mean, they're just insane is the only way I can put it. And it's mind-boggling to those of us who have had this experience. So I think one of the things that we can all agree on, and this is pretty clear, is that BLM Antifa have their roots in all of the socialist democratic run cities. It's very clear that Minneapolis-St. Paul is not a safe place for Trump supporters because it's not a coincidence. They're Biden voters, and I call them the mob now. It's easier than saying Antifa. They're far left, and I think they're the far left enforcer wing of the Democratic Party, and I believe that they are supported by the National Democratic Party. We have some investigations going on right now, and I love that Trump just announced this week that he's got the DOJ and Homeland Security also investigating Antifa. They're an organized group. There's also another. Oh, go ahead.
If I can interject quickly, it sounds like you've had sort of dozens of encounters with Antifa. Are you seeing a lot of the same faces? Does it seem like it's the same core group of people coming back over and over again, or is there high turnover in your estimation?
We do see, remember, out of a crowd of like the average I've seen show up are 250, 300. They showed up at the Back to Blue events that way. They've showed it up at other events. We have seen some of the same people, but not necessarily, but embedded within the group. You see some of the same people. And when we get to the chart in a minute, I will show you how organized they are. And I think those are some of the same people. But we also know, and we've done some investigation on this, they bring in people from out of state too. I mean, they're organized. The other thing that I think what people have to get rid of this notion that socialists are somehow have this image of being peaceful. Okay. In Venezuela, the strongman tactics down there, they weren't peaceful. And everyone needs to remember that Nazi stands for the National Socialist Workers' Party. I mean, socialism has had long roots in violence. And these people are no different. So when people say, oh, they're just socialists, they're Bernie supporters. No. These people are way different than that. The other thing that you can see that's kind of now, there's a concern just recently in the last couple of weeks, they have actually escalated. Used to be they'd bring everything from mace to bats. They brought a gun and they shot a guy in Portland and killed him.
Yep,
and that was Jay Bishop. And he was there as a Patriots Prayer supporter. And so, and again, there are different groups, but generally, if you're a Trump supporter, a conservative, I guess you're in the crosshairs. But they actually took out a gun and shot a guy. That really got to a lot of us who have been involved in all these Antifa things, because so far I've never seen any of them with a gun. So we're a little concerned that it's actually escalated. But let's take a look at this chart that I intercepted that I think will really surprise and shock a lot of people. You have this, and I know it might be hard for some of you that on the screen. By the way, Scott and Kyle assured me that we're going to post this with the videos. It'll be an attachment if you want to see it. But I'm just gonna read just a few of these things. These are the protest roles for Antifa. And it says, each fighting our own way, we climb the mountain together. So they have these things called shield soldiers. And they use wood boards, swim boards, and signs to form the first line of defense. Well, quite frankly, they take those boards like the guy down in Kenosha. He took a skateboard, which is a board, and he hit a guy over the head and got shot for it. So they talk defense. I've seen them used offensively. They have what's called peaceful protester. I love this one on the left. Protesters that don't want to fight. And quite frankly, to answer your question, Kyle, there are people embedded in the group that I think ratchet up and get people angry and fired up. But there are a lot of people who come that just want to be protesters.
Mhm.
So they do have a role for that, quote, peaceful protester. Then they have one called frontliner. These are the ones that use umbrellas to shield from cameras. Oh, okay. You don't want anyone taking pictures of the violence that you're doing? I love the other one. Is called the flag bearer. This is a person in the middle here. If police are advancing or attacking, I love that. Police are attacking. You know, they don't say police are just there to defend. They say police are attacking. Then they have the one called the range soldier. This is the one that they throw water bottles, by the way, frozen water bottles in Chicago, and umbrellas and trash to stop the police. Here's the one I love the best. Fire mage or whatever, however you pronounce that. These are the ones that are prepared to set fire. I mean, I'm amazed that they put this on as a public document that we could find. They have fire squads. They use water and traffic cones to suppress anyone who comes in to try to extinguish a fire. They have light mage. These are the ones, by the way, some police, I think it was in Portland or Seattle, were blinded. But they call them light mage, and they use these laser pointers, and they blind people with them. I've seen them at a protest, and you have to avert your eyes.
Yeah.
Then they have another one called medic, and this is in case, of course, anyone gets injured. This is one that's interesting. This one called Cop Watch. Here in Minneapolis, they're called yellow hats. And these are actually hired attorneys that show up to document any violence. And of course, it's like in the NFL, when a guy gets a penalty for fighting, he's usually, the guy who gets a penalty is the guy that got hit and he's hitting back. So what they do is if somebody tries to hit you, by the time you're defending yourself, then that's when they're videoing. It looks like you're the aggressor. I mean, the organization here is unbelievable. They have online comms. These are the ones that in real time, they do strategic updates via social media. They have designers that do all their, and by the way, the designers are at every event early, and they're painting. They have very good signs and very good graphics. But this is stunning when you think about it, that they actually have an organization like this. And this has been around. I've had this thing for months. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden now, people like Rand Paul and even, the president's been on this for a long time, but somebody like U.S. Senator Rand Paul, suddenly, because he got attacked leaving a Trump event, he said last week, I think they're organized. And I think that they are, have an organization schedule. He thinks they're funded. Yeah, no kidding. We've known that for years. I mean, it's just amazing to me how long it took to get this kind of onto the front page of people's concerns.
If I could interject here, this seems like a pretty intimidating structure. I've seen it myself. I've been to some of the same events that you've mentioned, and I've watched them in action. How has the numbers of conservative activists that you see turning out, how have those numbers been affected? In your estimation, are Minnesota conservatives intimidated by these people?
Oh, yes. In fact, I can tell you that this last Back to Blue event where they injured me, there were two women that were invited that were from Eden Prairie. They were, they described themselves as housewives, just housewives of Eden Prairie. And they wanted to come out to a police event and back the blue, show their support for police, especially with all the negative press that police was getting after the police were getting after the George Floyd event. And they had to have a police escort to their car because they had a mob screaming at them in their faces and threatening them all the way. And at least the St. Paul police did do a little good job of. And when the gal got in the car, she looked at me and she said, I'm never coming to another event, ever. I was going to bring my kids. Thank God I didn't. This has been a super what I would consider a process of intimidation and taking away our First Amendment rights.
And then amidst this process, have you seen the police taking an effective role against these people?
No, they just have not. I mean, I guess I'll take this back. One thing that we've really noticed now is if you're in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, okay, you're on your own.
Mhm.
I can tell you, anybody doing events. In fact, we talked to a guy. There was going to be a big back the blue event a few weeks. It was in August a few weeks ago, organized by a guy. I literally called up the guy and another friend of mine who's in an organization we'll talk about in a minute. We called him and we said, listen, unless you think you're going to have hundreds of people, do not do this. He was going to do it right at the Hennepin County Government Center. I said, that is literally, it's enemy territory to do something like that. And he said, well, we talked to the police. I said, it doesn't matter. The police will not protect you. Now, the counter to that is if you do something other than, well, the Hugo event was interesting because the Hugo event was something that nobody knew about. They just showed up at Bob Kroll's house.
Right.
But then when we did our counter event the next weekend on that Saturday, we had a really huge presence. People came, they're starting to show. We saw they also have scouts that come to our events and they scout the event. You'll see them on bicycles and motorcycles. We saw their scouts.
It's funny. I was sitting in my car one time very early on when there was the anti-mask COVID protest, and I was sitting in my car a couple blocks away from the protest, and I had a scout with a gun approach my vehicle, demand that I roll my window down. He identified himself as a scout and said that he's looking for fascist patrols. I mean, what you're describing is deeply disturbing. Our cities have become these tribally segmented war zones where police are totally ineffective to stop the clash. It is.
It's insane.
I can't underscore enough how deeply disturbing these things that you're saying are. Continue.
It is. And so at the Hugo event, obviously they did an event. They do that a lot. They announce the events, but it's hard to follow where they're going to be. I don't think anyone knew about the Bob Kroll's event ahead of time. Maybe some people did, but they'll do an event like that. And then for us to counter that event, it's too late and it's already done. What they're good at, though, is following the events we do. I know they follow me on Facebook. They follow me on Twitter. They follow a lot of us that are active, doing events or showing up at events. And so they send these scouts out. And if we are there in mass, they don't come over. Their scouts did a report, went back to their group in Hugo, and they didn't show. I know because our drone saw them grouping over on a side of the park. But if we overwhelm them with numbers, they do not show up, which is a key to it. We have to overwhelm them in numbers. Another thing that's amazing to me is that they can, they're also behind a lot of the statue destruction when the statues were being taken down. Mm-hmm. They can go do that, but people painting over Black Lives Matter graffiti are considered hate crime, and they're charged with hate crime. Rioters these rioters, again embedded with Antifa, can shut down our highways at a whim. We've seen it all over our town. But the commuters trying to escape, their windows being smashed, they're charged with traffic violations. I mean, protesters marching. The other one is the COVID thing is such a joke. Protesters marching shoulder to shoulder, and all these can show up, and yet we, because of we can't do anything on ours with or without the masks. I mean, it's just. The other one, the scariest one I've seen so far, is 1,000 black militia members, and this is on video if you want to Google it. They took over the streets in Georgia, and they pointed their guns at motorists and they demanded reparations.
Saw the video.
That's a little scary. Okay.
Yeah.
While any of the citizen militias that are generally white in Idaho, Utah, Wisconsin, New Mexico have been smeared publicly as racists. They're violent. They show up with guns, and all they've really done is defended their neighborhood. So there's such a double standard in the media about this. It's just mind-boggling to me.
And not only the media, but the court system, as you alluded to earlier. There's been a lot of trouble trying to get these people prosecuted, bring justice. Could you go into your struggles with that a little bit more? Tell us about how the prosecutors have been receiving your complaints. Any successes that you've had in court? Any failures you've had in court?
Yeah, the ones that we spent the most time were back at the March for Trump event, and it took us a year and a half. We finally got them charged. But an example would be there was one felony charge for assault, and that was with the person that had the taser and the mace, because I guess apparently taser is more of a deadly weapon. And that person did a flee back to Canada. So there's a warrant out for his arrest, but they never caught him because they arrested him and then let him go, and he went to Canada, and then he was charged with felony. So that's a joke. But to give you an example, Woody Kane when they tried to arrest him, he broke an officer's wrist and elbow. He fought back. Normally, you'd be charged with several different violations, resisting arrest. I mean, I could think of assault. He got charged with disorderly conduct, paid a fine, and that was it. So that'll tell you where John Choi and Bobby Clark were when it came to this. Now, because my name has been associated with going after these people technically or trying to get them to charge, I have 3 police reports in for my broken wrist. Mm-hmm. When I was there, by the way, amazingly, the police who were there in the riot gear basically saw this happen. I have it on video. Rebecca Brandon was there. She videoed it. I've got pictures of it. I've got witness statements, everything. But the police there said, we can't leave our post keeping the peace, like as riot police, I guess. Yeah. So he said, if you want to make a report, I had to dial 911 with 20 police standing there. And I had to walk a block away to meet a squad car because the police that were not in riot gear would not come into that environment. That's how dangerous it was, that a St. Paul cop wouldn't even come in there. I had to go meet him a block away.
Kind of a related anecdote to that. One time I was at one of these Back the Blue rallies, and after everything calmed down, the conservatives left. The Antifa won. They had, sort of overthrown the conservative presence. The police stood down, and then the police sent people with notepads to take statement reports from the Antifa. So as you're telling me about all these difficulties that conservatives have had trying to file reports, we have police literally approaching these left-wing demonstrators and asking if they can take reports. I'm curious about your wrist, though. I feel like that's kind of been the elephant in the room. Could you tell us what's happened there?
Yeah, so what happened is, and by the way, the reason there are 3 police reports is because one is for assault. I think it's felony assault. He tried to hit me, but the second one is as I was walking away, some of the Antifa, and they're always dressed up in their black, and you can spot them a mile away now. They followed me. 3 of them followed me. They didn't know I was there with 3 of my buddies walking with me. And they came up right up to me and said, if you file a police report, it's going to be public record. We'll get your address and we're going to come to your house and we're going to kill you.
Really?
And the cop was right there. So one of the witnesses is a policeman. And I said, you should arrest that guy. That's felony terroristic threats.
It is.
And so he said, I don't know. You've got your witnesses. I mean, literally, these cops wanted nothing to do with us or with them. It's sad. Any other environment, if somebody hit somebody or somebody threatened their life and a policeman heard about it, that guy'd be in cuffs.
Yeah.
But in these days, it's just like the world's upside down. So now I've been chasing the police around for weeks. This happened a month and a half ago. Because the one thing I can tell you is one of the sergeants over there I'm working with the St. Paul Police, he is following through. He's getting the witness statements. He's doing all that. But again, I've got to have the city attorney or the county attorney charge it out. The police don't do the charging. It's the attorney that does the charging. Yeah. And so let's wait and see how long it takes me to have to, because now they know my name. So of course, I'm sure they're going to be even less reluctant to even help me with this. But this is how crazy it is. It's like we try to have these peaceful events, we get attacked, and then technically remedy in this country is you go to the police and they arrest people and they make people pay. And in this environment, they don't.
So
it's just mind-boggling.
I have to ask, one thing I've been hearing a lot of conservatives question is how long is it going to be worth it? If you can show up to these events and Antifa can threaten to murder you, they can break your bones, they can, use weapons on you, and the police will do absolutely nothing. How long is it going to be worth it for conservatives to show up and do these rallies? And how much enthusiasm is there left over for going out in public and demonstrating?
I will I will speak to that in just a minute, but before we finish this, I just wanted to say the other problem we have is even when they do get arrested, they get out on bail.
Sure.
I mean, Joe Biden did a speech the other day and he wants cashless bail. And that's basically what they have for these people. In fact, you did I think a article that I read about the vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, promoted the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which is a Soros-backed organization that has literally millions of dollars, and they post bail for all these criminals. So even when the police do arrest them, they get out anyway. In fact, I've got a buddy who's a Hennepin County sheriff. He said when we're booking them, they all say and kid around about we'll be out of here in an hour. And these are people that are arrested for serious things. That's the system against us, and it's kind of sad. But getting back to your point, the solutions I think kind of come down to this. Obviously, I don't think I need to harp on it anymore. It's in the news every day.
Yeah,
we have to vote Republican in the next election. We have to turn Minnesota from blue, the blue state it is, to red, because if it continues to be a blue state and the Twin Cities continue to dominate the state, basically, I agree with you, Kyle. We're pretty much screwed. I don't think we're going to have the authorities ever on our side when Donald Trump gets reelected. I think it's going to be just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the solution, and here's where I want to make this point today to everybody listening. I think that it can't be just the politicians and the Republican politicians. Ultimately, what will fix this is citizens standing up. We have a lot of citizens.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that I believe that there are a tremendous amount of citizens in this state that are law-abiding. I think they're quiet. In fact, I work in politics. That's what I do for a living. One of the polls we've taken is we think there's a mass of people that are used to be called the silent majority. I now call them the silent Trump majority. I think there's a huge mass of people that have just had it with this stuff. And so first of all, it takes them to stand up and go to the polls and vote for Republicans and get Trump reelected, and as many as we can. We're stuck with Walz until 2022. We got to hold on to the Senate. That's my pitch for politics today. And anyone that can help anyone in a House race, we got to help out the House. We only need to win 9 seats to get the House back. Mm-hmm. But the point is that the next thing you can do is you've got to be active on social media. When you see these events, you have to show up. And I know it's scary. That's why I started out this whole talk about it. I know it's scary. I know it's a concern. I know those 2 gals I met from Eden Prairie may not come back to another one. But unless we stand up as citizens, I don't think the politicians can totally solve this problem, because they're taking away our constitutional right. They're taking away our constitutional right. And I'm a constitutional specialist. I studied it in school. And I can tell you right now, the First Amendment's pretty clear. Not only do you have a right to free speech, but you have a right to go to the town square and exercise your free speech. And we are being prohibited from going to the town square and exercising our free speech to support the police or Trump or conservative values or pro-life or whatever you want.
I've got 2 questions kind of related to that. First, if we should elect Republicans, what makes you confident that the Republicans would take any action against Antifa? Because so far we've seen a somewhat limp response from our legislators on this problem. And second, when it comes time to go to these events, of course, there's lots of people that don't want to get maced or frankly might not see the value in putting themselves in danger to make what's ultimately going to be a sort of a 10-minute talking bite on local news. So I guess first, do you think Republicans will, in fact, crack down on Antifa if we reelect them? And second, what do you say to people that are doubtful that it's even worth it to show up and clash with these individuals?
I'll deal with the first one because, I work in that space and I've worked with a lot of Republicans over the years. And I can tell you right now, we have a politician problem. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to generalize, and I'll tell you, there have been some really good ones. At the local level, Senator Mark Corrin, he shows up at everything. He's fantastic. Senator Dan Hall, another one. Senator Dan Hall was there when I got my wrist broken, and he's one of the guys that videoed it. And by the way, they called him out by name, and they screamed and yelled at him and yelled at and called him some of the most derogatory things you can possibly imagine. The Majority Leader Paul Gazelka has done a good job now in the last month or so. He's been standing up. He's been talking about it. But unfortunately, it's just been a handful so far that have spoken out. In fact, this is the sad part of it. One legislator that I talked to about this, and he'll remain unnamed, he actually laughed in my face as if it was funny and as if maybe this wasn't really happening in the streets. I mean, so we really do have a broad spectrum. I think the best things happened in the last month or so is that Donald Trump has been talking about this nonstop. Donald Trump moved his entire strategy as presidency to a law and order strategy. It's very clear now. And you're seeing this trickle down. Quite frankly, the chair of our party, the chair of the MNGO party, I've been talking to her about this for months, didn't pay any attention to it. Yep. Donald Trump starts talking about it. By the way, she got attacked leaving the Donald Trump event. And suddenly it's like Rand Paul. Oh my God, this is real. You know, no kidding. It's only been on video and in pictures, and only people like me filing police reports for like 3 years, but suddenly now it's real to them. But the good news is even she's talking about it now. So I guess it's not too late to come to the party. So quite frankly, I think there's momentum going there, Kyle, that I think more and more they're starting to pay attention to it. And I think Republicans, if you jump on this law and order theme, regardless of what position you're running for, local, I don't care if it's city council, local, all the way up to Trump, you jump on law and order, I think it's going to have a huge effect at the polls in November.
Sure.
The second part of it is, yes, if you go to an event in Minneapolis or St. Paul and you can't be guaranteed that the police are going to be there to defend you like they should, I think that's a big problem. And I think I'm actually telling people and trying to encourage them, if we're going to do the events, let's do them in the suburbs. The one thing I saw, I'll tell you, the Back to Blue event in Bloomington, it could have been really chaotic because it was a big group. And Rebecca Brannon was there. She did it for Alpha News. There was a huge group of BLM Antifa, but the Bloomington police were there in force, and they stood right there. And I am convinced, after talking to them, if anyone would have done what they did in St. Paul, they would have intervened. So I think the suburban police are not going to let this kind of stuff happen. And so I'm encouraging. I think, quite frankly, I think Minneapolis and St. Paul are lost. I just think they're lost. So if it's in the suburbs, I think show up.
I tend to agree with you there. I know that my colleague Rebecca Brannon, who you've mentioned several times, was robbed. Antifa took her phone. I know I was robbed at gunpoint downtown. I don't think that was Antifa. I think that was just some less than reputable community members of North Minneapolis. But I think that's a very important point to bring up, that sometimes it's not worth it. And if you're going to go into a situation where your safety can't be guaranteed and you might literally die, and the police aren't even going to be there to take a statement, you should really think twice about that. And I think that's something very important to impress upon our viewers. Yes, Antifa is a threat. Absolutely. It's an existential threat to democracy. This mob rule is a huge problem, but you also got to remember, your own personal safety matters, and you can't vote and you can't sound the alarm to your friends if you're in a body cast or worse. So I just had to mention that because I feel so strongly that people should not put themselves in overly dangerous situations. So tell me, aside from voting and aside from showing up, what kinds of things can be done day to day to protect individuals from Antifa? I know that a lot of people like to go to conservative events that, aren't protests, and they end up feeling unsafe when Antifa shows up. So, what kind of organizations exist in Minnesota that you could tell us about that might help to counteract that?
Well, we do have a organization that I have formed with another buddy of mine called Antifa Hunters. And we started with about 10, we're up to about 30 now. They're mostly retired police, Marines, a couple of football players. These are big guys. I mean, I'm 6'3", and these guys are bigger than me. And we show up at events where the cowards try to attack and shout down peaceful rally goers. We understand their tactics. They're always in large numbers. They divide and surround. Then we intervene. But we have a couple rules, and I'd love to encourage anyone out there that wants to join us. Ping me on Facebook, Twitter. I mean, there's ways to get a hold of me. But the one thing we do not allow is guns. And the majority of these people, including myself, are conceal and carry. But the reason we don't allow guns, we do bring mace, and otherwise it's physical force. Because the day one of us shoots one of them, that will ruin that person's life forever. And I don't care if you're being attacked and it's self-defense, it doesn't matter anymore in this country. They will come after you. They will, in fact, we now call it, it's called legal or judicial terrorism,
Yep.
where they drag you through the court systems to basically until you go broke.
Look at Kyle
And-
Rittenhouse. Clear-cut case of self-defense. He's being slandered by the media and prosecuted for multiple homicides. It's
Exactly.
absurd.
Exactly. And we started Antifa Hunters back when Trump came to town last spring? I can't remember exactly when. But we started it back then. And we literally were watching, I mean, here's mom and pop driving in from Winona. And they're excited to be Trump. That's when Trump was at Target Center. Excited to be there, see Trump, leaving with all their Trump stuff. And they're getting attacked walking out of Target Center. Well, we were there. We couldn't cover all of it because there were only that night, there were only 7 of us. But we literally, when they'd surround people and start attacking them, first they take your Trump stuff and then they try to hit you because they had a bonfire of Trump hats and stuff right there in front of Target Center. I don't know if you were down there, Kyle, but it was insane.
I was.
But we literally came up and we literally pushed Antifa out of the way. And as soon as they saw us protecting them, they ran. These people are cowards.
They are cowards.
They prey on somebody that's not armed or that's by themselves. That's what they do. They surround single people or an older couple. We protected this older couple that were trying to leave in their car and they were trying to smash their window. So we have this group. It's some, you can have some confidence that we're going to be at the events, but we can't always have everybody there because of schedules. But we think that at least if they know, and I'm getting pretty public about this, so that at least they know that we're going to show at some of these events, and they better be at least aware of that, and maybe just the rumor of us showing up will do something. But it's really gotten out of hand. It's gotten to the point where I guess there's one opinion that I'm going to leave you with here tonight, and that is that I think if this continues to get worse, which I think in September and October, I think they're going to ratchet up right before the election. The question is, when Trump wins the election, and I do believe he's going to, is it going to be just mass chaos? Is it going to get worse because with their hate for Trump? So I don't think the election is just like this goalpost where suddenly, everything's going to be fine again. I think what's going to happen, and again, I've studied the Constitution considerably back, when I was in school. And I think there's the best thing that ever happened out of the Constitution was the 10th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Because the 10th Amendment really does give states the priority to set the tone for your state. And I believe that there is going to be a mass migration of citizens within the United States that are going to go, red states are going to get redder, blue states are going to get bluer. Yeah. And I believe that people, you can see it right now in Minneapolis. I mean, I hear that you can't rent a U-Haul. I mean, everybody's moving out of there, whether they're moving to outstate or whether they're moving out of the state. I talked to a bunch of people in my age category, and they're all like, I'm out of here. My retirement's coming up. I'm gone. Wow. But I think, and I think our founders knew that. I think it was brilliant. They figured out that local authorities should win the day over central government for the most part, and it stood the test of time. Exceptions, of course, are Roe v. Wade and some of that stuff. But central government intrusion, for the most part, has been pretty much blunted. And therefore, I think that you're just going to see bluer states get blue and redder states get red. And there's going to be kind of this mass migration that's going to end up where you're living in a state that follows the politics you like. And, obvious red states are like Utah, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, things like that. Now, the other thing it could set the stage for is if we do someday get a Democrat in the White House and Democrat, and they decide that they're going to try to override federalism or the 10th Amendment, then I could see there being an armed conflict in this country. But I really do believe this is how it could play out.
It's a very sad state of affairs when people are literally moving states to try to find safety. You've got groups of private individuals trying to ensure safety in the streets against roving mobs because the police are nowhere to be found, and federalism is literally up for question. It's not a good thing. We're kind of pulling down to the end of our time here, but I do want to address some questions. Our viewers always type in some good questions for us.
Okay.
The first one comes from Jeffrey Schmitz. He says it's a good idea to defend yourself at those rallies when attacked by Antifa. I think we touched on that a little bit. Of course, if you end up having to kill somebody, your life is going to be ruined in court forever. I, for one, do not recommend lethal force unless absolutely necessary. And I also recommend just keeping yourself out of those situations to begin with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, what we're going to do as Antifa hunters is we're going to all carry mace. And quite frankly, the only scary part of that answer, as of 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I would have said it's good. But the guy that was shot in Portland and killed used mace. The story that's come out now is that Patriot, Patriot prayers or whatever they are,
Mhm.
he used mace on people that were coming to attack him, and they shot him with a gun.
And those people hunted him. He was sort of leaving the main rally.
Yes.
I've researched this extensively. He was leaving the main rally, and a bunch of individuals, these scouts, I guess you might call them, said, quote, "We got a Trumper right here." The gunman said, "This guy?" The scout pointed and said, "Yeah, that guy." And the gunman walked up and shot him twice in the chest. It's a horrific video. It's online. It's horrific. And he died.
But apparently he did use mace first. He was armed with mace, and he did use mace first. So I guess my answer is, up until that happened, and we found out now that Antifa are actually arming themselves with firearms. Prior to that, I would say bring mace, and if you have to, one of our guys always brings a bat. Doesn't look real user friendly, but he brings a bat. And so, but all I can tell you is, don't bring guns. Don't bring guns. If you shoot somebody, it'll ruin your life, and that's the unfortunate. I mean, 2A is the site. I mean, 2A is second because it protects 1A. Okay. Yeah. So now we're almost kind of restricted to exercise our Second Amendment rights because of, this, they'll tie you up in legal action forever. And it'll be interesting to find out what happens to the guy in Kenosha and how that works out. But I'm sure his life is ruined for 5 years.
Yeah. I guess my final comment on that question would be: do carry a gun, but don't go to riots. Carry a gun in daily business, but don't go to riots.
No, I'm concealed carry in other areas.
Carol asks, follow the money. How can we find the trail? That's a very interesting question. Have you come across any information about how Antifa is funded or who's writing the checks?
We have. Back when we did a lot of, I hired a private investigator when we were going through from the March for Trump event. And he sourced it back because at the 100 Days event, we had a witness that watched somebody handing out envelopes of cash to the quote protesters as they were leaving right in front of the Capitol. It was over at the side of the Capitol, and he was handing out envelopes of cash. And so our guy followed him and got his license number. We figured out who it was, and we tracked, we think, the money back to a Soros-funded organization.
Can you name that organization by any chance?
No, I can't right now because I don't want. There could be some issues with liability, and because I know the law real well, I don't want some defamation lawsuit landing on my desk. But I can tell you this, is that right now the biggest encouragement I've heard, and Bill Barr is no pushover, and Trump ordered the DOJ to investigate Antifa right to the top. He wants to find out where is their funding coming from. And believe me, the DOJ has got way better resources than I have or my little group had of 11 plaintiffs. The other thing, too, is he's brought in a Department of Homeland Security, too. And those two organizations, they're investigating on the ground, and DOJ is investigating, and I truly believe that this is Soros-backed all the way.
Sure. Speaking of powerful people, we have another question also from Carol. Keith Ellison's position on the situation. We can probably sort of predict what that is, but could you speak to that? Because it looks like the top law enforcement official in our state has been friendly to Antifa.
Friendly to Antifa. I mean, I've got a picture that I could show anyone where he's got the Antifa handbook. I mean, that picture's been all over Facebook. I'm sure you've seen it, Kyle, and maybe Carol. I'm sure you've seen it. The bottom line is, yeah, we've got the attorney general of this state he's a Soros appointed attorney general. Soros did years ago, he did what was called the Secretary of State agenda. And what he did is he funded a whole bunch of secretaries of state across the country to get elected. He put millions of dollars into that. He did the same thing with attorney generals. And yeah, there it is. You found it exactly. I mean, that's our attorney general. I mean, a picture. I mean, do we need to say anything else? I mean, come on.
You could say 1,000 words and it wouldn't even get close to that.
It's mind-boggling. Anyway, but so he is there because of the George Soros, what was called the AG or Attorney General protocol that he put together, and he funded, like the nutcase over in Philadelphia is one of his, Ellison's one of his. I mean, I could name. I've been following up. There's about 5 of them that got elected because he put millions in. Because I've run 2 attorney general races in this state. Okay, the most you ever see spent on those are maybe $500,000 to $1 million. Well, he put in millions, as much as that person needed, and money talks in politics. So he got a lot of AGs in. So the bottom line, the answer to Carol is, that's not an area we can look for any help in any way, unfortunately.
You've painted a pretty grim picture tonight. We have law enforcement that is, seemingly willfully inept when it comes to dealing with Antifa. You have violent individuals that are willing to commit grievous bodily harm against conservatives. You've got a city that's unsafe to walk through, without some sort of protection. What's your long-term prognosis? Just last question here. What do you think the ultimate trajectory of Antifa is?
Well, I'm hoping that, in fact, what I read the other day is that they're going to use some of the RICO statutes to go after the funders. So it's going to be like going after organized crime. I mean, basically, they are organized crime. They're the new organized crime in our country. And I believe that I think Trump has had enough. And I believe that when he, has his DOJ get into action, they're good. I mean, I trust Bill Barr. I think that guy knows what he's doing. So if we start to go after the top and the leadership and their funding, it takes time though, because they have to go through the legal process and they can be fought, and the depositions and there's all kinds of ways you can fight this stuff forever. But I think that very clearly that is a huge solution. Until then, they're incredibly strong and powerful. And so what I'd like to conclude with is this, and you mentioned this before, Kyle, this really is an existential fight. Yes. for our country and our constitutional rights. This is, in my lifetime, this is the most, I guess, fundamental attack I've ever seen on my constitutional rights as an individual in this country, as a United States citizen. But we need to show up in massive numbers. I'm not saying so much in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm not sure it's safe to go there, but anywhere else. We're doing a big boating rally on Lake Minnetonka again on Saturday. Last one, we had 125 boats. We'll probably have 200 boats this time. We've been told Antifa might show on one of the bridges and try to drop cement bricks on our boats. So I've already got our Orono Police Department and Wayzata Police Department. They're going to be there watching this. If you're in the suburbs, I think you've got some protection. I know the cops in Orono and Wayzata, they're great cops. They would never let any of the stuff happen to us. So, but we need to show up. And when we do, I can tell you they're cowards. They run away. It may be a little scary from time to time, but it is essential and necessary that you get on social media, use your constitutional rights there, show up at events, use your constitutional rights there. If we show up en masse every time we do an event, and we'll be there with Antifa hunters to help out, I think we can overcome this shadow over the state of Minnesota.
Absolutely. Well, nice to leave it off on a bit of a positive note there after such a.
I think so. Yeah. By the way, you can follow me on Facebook at Jonathan Anstead, and then you can follow me on Twitter at @JAnestead. And Absolutely. Of course, I think, Kyle, you're going to talk about how they can find this video if the others that need to.
Yep. So absolutely, follow our guest here, Jonathan. Follow him on social media. Stay posted on what's going on in Minnesota. If you want to find the archived recording of this interview, please visit the Alpha News Facebook page. Go to live streams, and under that tab, there will be all of the live streams that Alpha News has ever done. There's been quite a few good ones, this one included. And There you can find a link to share with your friends, and you can also just, find this video, which might be a useful thing if you want to share it or you want to go back and learn something about Antifa. Excellent conversation tonight. Thank you so much for being on the show. In conclusion, I just want to tease one of our upcoming guests a little bit more, Richie McGinnis. We talked several times tonight about what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We talked several times about Kyle Rittenhouse. Richie is a coworker and a friend of mine with the Daily Caller, and he was there. He was literally feet away from Kyle Rittenhouse when he opened fire. We're going to discuss with him what he saw. We're going to discuss, of course, none of us can pass a judgment on Kyle Rittenhouse, but we're going to, get into the play-by-play of exactly what happened there. So tune in on September 8th. That'll be a nice continuation of this discussion right now about, armed extremism in our streets and Antifa. Jonathan, thanks for being with us.
Boy, thanks a lot, Kyle. This is a great opportunity.
Absolutely.